Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Browning?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here. Tonight's invocation will be led by Father Sylvester from St. Mary's Church. Welcome to Delaware. We're not even going there on that last name. Followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all please stand. You can come forward to the microphone.
Thank you. I read from Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go later to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, while the Lord bless his people while they are asleep. Invocation. Lord God, we praise you and we thank you for our city, the city of Delaware. We pray for your blessing, your protection, your peace, love, and unity among us. Amen.
Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And number 4 is the approval of the motion summary. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Would you like to do them together or separate?
You can do them separate.
Approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting of council held on February 25th, 2019, as recorded and transcribed.
For approval. Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries.
And approval of the motion summary of the work session meeting of council held on March 4th, 2019, as recorded and transcribed.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer? Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. If you please read this into the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary of the Shade Tree Commission meeting held on November 27, 2018, as recorded and transcribed. Item B, acceptance of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting held on February 6, 2019, as recorded and transcribed. Item C, resolution number 19-10, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an intergovernmental cooperation agreement between Delaware County Board of Commissioners and the City of Delaware as required by the Ohio Development Services Agency to conduct a joint analysis of impediments to fair housing. Item D, establish March 25th, 2019 at 8:00 p.m. as a date and time for a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 19-08, an ordinance prohibiting use of any form of tobacco.
Thank you. What is the wish of council on the consent agenda?
Can I just ask Tom a question? Tom, could you just fill us in a little bit on what this Ohio Development Services Agency, that analysis is all about?
Yeah, periodically, we are required by federal law to undertake a report that looks at the impediments to fair housing. It's in connection with the block grant funding we receive. We do this, I think, can't remember what the duration is, every 5 years, 3 years. So we're doing this in conjunction with the county. It's on fair housing.
Will we get something back?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a report that you get. Yeah.
Is there any expenditure?
We will use our state dollars for that project. That's allowed.
We're actually saving money by doing a joint study with the county.
I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Browning. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, and public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time?
Sorry to raise my hand for permission, but I'm not at home, so I hope I can do that. Madam Mayor, City Council, thank you very much for allowing me to have a couple minutes of your time.
Got to state your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike Rush, 778 Canal Street here in Delaware.
Thank you.
This is all just my opinion, and I'm allowed to state that because I'm not at home, where I'm not allowed to do that very often. So I'm gonna make this pretty good. Again, my name is Mike Rush. I'm a 50-year resident of the city of Delaware, with 32 years in the manufacturing industry. The reason I'm going to take a couple minutes of your time is because I want to address some issues that I thought resulted from last Monday's workshop featuring BIA. To me, BIA made a great argument as to why Delaware needs more multifamily housing. During this discussion, I was able to pull off some of the data of my own, which supports some of the data that, along with some stats that were surprised to me at first that the BIA gave to us last Monday. Before I do that, let me tell you a couple of quotes that some members of the City Council made last Monday. Companies are pulling workforce from other places. That was said by Mayor Regal, and that was supported by Sean Hughes. People who live here work here. That was said by Vice Mayor Schaefer and by Second Ward City Council person Lisa Keller. That is true to a certain degree. According to the stats I pulled from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, Delaware has a 3.5 unemployment rate as compared to the U.S. average, which is 3.9. That's just coming from as late as January. I was not able to pull February. They haven't had those numbers put out yet. But what I also discovered is that according to the census.org, Delawareans travel an average of 25.7 minutes to work, while the rest of Ohio travels an average of 23.4. So what does that tell us? It says that Delaware has two needs to which the data reflects: multifamily housing and more jobs. If companies are pulling their workforce from other places, if we have places for them to live here in the city, the better the economic growth, better employee retention, and that's what's one of the statistics that the BIA pulled from their data. To address the more jobs issue, the city has to make some decisions. And then again, that's just my opinion. We need to make Delaware more attractive to new and existing companies and businesses to move to the city. We need to make it easier. Why fight it? Why make it hard? You're not going to stop development. You're not going to stop it. We need to find ways to develop Sawmill Parkway to attract businesses. If we were able to attract corporate headquarters here in the city of Delaware, I think we're going to find more white-collar jobs, more blue-collar jobs. And I cannot say I come from a blue-collar background. Even though I have a desk and a couple computer screens, I'm more or less maybe a sky blue collar now. But again, the following is just my opinion. It seems that we are a little reactive. We tend to sit on our hands and wait for things to happen. We cannot do this. We come up with excuses. We cannot do this. We cannot do that. What about our resources? I'm a little proactive, maybe a little aggressive. That just comes from my blue collar background. I tend to see things from my point of view and try to make things happen. But instead of thinking that why can't we come to a new mindset of how can we? That's something we have to think about is how can we? Because we're not going to stop development. Delaware City is growing, and no matter what, you're not going to stop it. With that said, I decided last week to be a little proactive. And I'm sorry, Sean's not here, Sean Hughes. I'm about ready to step on his toes. Maybe it's a good thing he's not here. But I'll involve him later. Again, I was a little bit proactive, maybe a little bit aggressive. I've started to email number one, I work at Vertiv, which used to be Emerson Network Power, which used to be called Liebert back in the day. Been there almost 25 years. Was working for a supplier there for 5 years prior. So I've been making Liebert products for 30 years. I decided to start emailing the plant managers from major manufacturers here in Delaware. Started with my plant manager, which is told me to take the reins, and you got it. You take the reins and go for it. And so with his blessing, I've emailed certain plant managers, and I haven't concluded that email yet. But my hope is to start what I call the Pittsburgh Drive Committee, where the plant managers, the quality managers, would get together once a month to discuss business constraints that come with business, and maybe together we can come up with something that will create jobs here for the city of Delaware. And my hope is that when this is all said and done, I will eventually involve Mr. Hughes and Kelsey into the mix. But I just want everybody to know that, I mean, this is a great city, great council, but we cannot stop development anymore. We need to make it easier. We need to develop Sawmill Parkway. They already got the fiber optic laid down there. We just need to create an environment which is welcoming to businesses and create an environment where we can have some corporate headquarters move here in Delaware City to create more jobs. That's all I got to say. Have a great night.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to committee reports. Mr. Jones?
I have none, Mayor.
Mrs. Keller? I have none. Mrs. Browning?
I have none.
Mr. Rourke?
I have none.
Mr. Hellingham?
BCA meets Wednesday.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer?
Tom and I will be at Morpsey this Thursday.
Okay. We had planning on Wednesday, and Sister City's coming up, but that's all I have. Okay, we'll move on to presentations. Our first presentation, or proclamation, I'm sorry, is recognizing Social Work Month. Chief Donahue, if you'll please come forward. How are you this evening? Whereas the City of Delaware has a responsibility to recognize occasions of outstanding significance, and where social work profession is dedicated to enhancing well-being and helping meet the basic needs of all people, especially those who are vulnerable, oppressed, and living in poverty. Whereas this year's Social Work Month, Elevate Social Work, embodies the need to recognize the extraordinary contributions of the professions of our society. Whereas social workers elevate and empower people, giving them the ability to solve problems, cope with personal roadblocks, and get the resources they need to succeed. Whereas it is the city's desire to offer comprehensive services to all citizens and ensure that they have access to the needed services, enabling them to reside at their home with services, and support in improving their safety and well-being. Whereas the City of Delaware and SourcePoint work together in providing service coordination via the FIRST program to citizens by identifying, linking, and coordinating services needed and available in this community. Whereas this partnership of service coordinators for the FIRST program provided screening, intake, education, assessment, advocacy, and individuals out of Fire Station 303 working conjointly with fire, police, and local agencies. Now therefore, I, Carolyn K. Rebel, Mayor of the City of Delaware, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2019 as National Society Work Month in the City of Delaware, Ohio, and call upon its citizens to recognize the numerous contributions made by American social workers and the thanks for their continued efforts for all the front work of the social justice to the better of living for all. Thank you very much. And the Source Point is huge here in Delaware. It is wonderful to keep the people in their homes, which is just another reason that we need affordable housing so they can stay in their home, and with the help of Source Point, giving them what they need to stay there. So I'm so thankful that we are so fortunate in Delaware to have you.
Thank you. We're very, very pleased with this partnership that we have with the City of Delaware. We're celebrating our 5th year of providing service coordination through the FIRST program in the City of Delaware, and this is that's providing to older adults. We also provide service coordination to those under the age of 55. We began to do that through a contract with the city in mid-year 2017. And last year we were able to serve 358 older adults and 103 of those younger adults under the age of 55. And the majority of those that are under the age of 55, they are between the ages of 22 and 30, or 23 and 34, correct? 25 and 34, excuse me. So it's really different. Serving the younger adults, we find that the majority of those clients are actually male, where with older adults, the majority of the clients that we serve are actually female. So it's kind of an interesting twist. But I know that the chief has been really great to work with this project, and he's been very supportive from the very beginning. And I know he has a couple of
yes, just real quickly, and we greatly appreciate our partnership with Source Point. And I'd also like to thank our police officers as well, because they've also been providing leads into this program. The numbers that Paris shared are all new clients. In other words, they were not clients that they had previously contacted. So if you look at that over a 5-year period, you need to increase, but it's a phenomenal amount of people. I just want to give you an example of our new program, which is under the age of 55. And I'm going to use my name, John, as being the client, just so we don't reveal anybody. But we began to see an increase for John, who has called Delaware Fire Department over 30 times in the 2-month period for EMS. Calls range from being sick to threats of suicide. At the time we began to work with John, he was admitted to Dublin Springs for care, where he remained there for 2 weeks. After John's release from Dublin Springs, there were 19 additional calls for service in a 2-week period of time. Our police department also began seeing an increase in responses for John. And our captain for EMS, Captain Al Madison, and our medical director and service coordinator began to create a care plan for this individual. The plan included the use of Delaware Morrow County Mental Health and Recovery Board and Delmore dwellings who had a case work for John. Together, the agencies identified that John was also suffering from alcohol abuse. Late December, John was admitted for medical detox for alcohol abuse. Later, released and agreed to stay at the STAR Center so that he can get his medication and mental health treatment that would need him. Since that period of time, he did not get any calls. So I think this is just a prime example of getting the right people in and helping our citizens. Thank you.
yes, thank you.
Thank you again for all you do.
Thank you.
To do that.
Next on the agenda, we're going to have a presentation by Senator Andy Brenner with the Ohio State Senate District 19. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Vice Mayor, and members of Delaware City Council. I'm glad I could be here as State Senator for the 19th District. And I'll give you basically a brief update of some of the things that are going on. You're probably reading the main thing that's been going on, which has been the transportation budget that's been going through the General Assembly. I was just reading some updates. The Transportation Committee met today in the Senate for the first time with the director of ODOT, and they're going over some options there as to what may happen. I do like the one change that the House made, which is to try to appropriate more dollars for local governments for their roads and bridges. So we'll see how that goes. Those who don't know, I currently was appointed to several committees in the Ohio Senate. I'm on the Education Committee again. I'm a vice chair of Local Government, Public Safety, and Veterans Affairs. I'm on the Insurance and Financial Institutions Committee. I'm on the Energy and Utilities Committee, and I'm also on the subcommittee on finance. So when we get into the operating budget, I'll be working on primary and secondary school funding, which is one of the areas I wanted to focus on. And I'm on two of the joint committees, the Joint Education Oversight Committee and the JCAR, which reviews all the agency rules that go through the Ohio General Assembly. I did want to try to start off with a quick outline of some of the priority bills that the Senate leadership under Senate President Ophoff picked for the 133rd General Assembly. I'll go through a few of those bills and then a few things that I'm working on, as well as some of the proposals that have come out of the House of Representatives on the transportation budget, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Four of the areas that they're going to focus on again are deregulation and expanding economic opportunities. So four of the first Senate bills that came out, Senate Bills 1, 7, 8, and 9, we're all dealing with ways to try to help improve economic opportunities in Ohio. Senate Bill 1 was an aim to reduce government regulations by 30% over 3 years to bring Ohio in line with national average on regulations. Senate Bill 7 was to remove job barriers for Ohio's military families. Senate Bill 8 incentivizes investment for opportunity zones in economically disadvantaged areas around the state to encourage job growth via tax credits. And Senate Bill 9 helps small businesses better evaluate the most appropriate and cost-effective health benefit plans for their employees by permitting the businesses to access certain claims information for the purpose of being informed. So trying to get more transparency there, make it easier for businesses to be able to shop health insurance. Lake Erie has been a topic in Ohio's drinking water in general. So Senate Bill 2 is actually dealing with that, and that's to try to address not only Lake Erie and the Lake Erie watershed, but all of our rivers and streams to try to make sure that we are maintaining those and can clean it up. The opioid crisis, addiction services, and criminal justice reform is the next kind of peg of that. And there were a bunch of Senate bills dealing with those types of issues. I'm even working on a bill modeled after one in Pennsylvania that would be trying to deal with some criminal justice reform. And then lastly, education. They're going to try to provide more funding for schools that have not participated in the past on the school funding for buildings and facilities. So that's a couple of the things that, in general, the Senate wants to prioritize. We did have the State of the State address a week ago, and Governor DeWine has some of his priorities. Early childhood education is one of them. And I'll be supporting those efforts that the governor has in that. I've already been drafting bills that were left over from the last General Assembly, as well as new ones for this General Assembly, including amendments to the upcoming operating budget, as well as the transportation budget. Some of those, I've got about 22 to 25 bill drafts at this point of various things, including several that have been introduced. I have a couple of mine that I'm working on again are school funding reform. Delaware City schools and Olentangy are capped, and to me that has been a major problem because that actually has an impact on our local property taxes, and it is very significant in my opinion. When we're paying thousands of dollars in property taxes each year, yet other areas are heavily subsidized, that has an impact not just on our schools and our ability to fund our local schools here, but it also has an impact on money that could be available for local roads and bridges and other things that you may want to do here in Delaware City. So I'm going to continue to work on that, and I hope that when the budget comes to the Senate, we'll have some plans for that. Working on several things in the transportation budget, as well as several bills dealing with that. The pedestrian crossing bill, Chief Pijanowski approached me about a year ago over some crosswalk issues over here at Ohio Wesleyan, and I've introduced a bill to try to address that matter. We've also drafted it so that it could be potentially put in the transportation budget, but if we can't get it in, I'm planning to move ahead with it as a bill, have hearings, and the chief is willing to come down along with others to testify in favor of it. My understanding is that something similar may have been in the budget when DeWine put it in there to begin with, so I'll look into that to verify. Working on bills dealing with dyslexia. I've got some gas tax amendments. One amendment that I'm trying to do is to address the needs of our airports. One of the issues that we've had is that the transportation bill puts all the gas tax money, and that includes aviation fuel tax money, into just one general pot for roads and bridges, but they don't differentiate those dollars to set them aside for just runways and airport infrastructure needs. So my amendment would say that any dollars generated from gasoline tax on aviation fuel would be set aside for funds that would only go to airports. So we're going to try to get that in the transportation bill. If not, I'm going to probably introduce that as a separate bill as well. One that deals primarily at the county level would be indigent defense. Over the years, the indigent defense funds have fallen off to the county, so they're not getting as much money, and that's across the state. Mine would return it to at least the 50% that was supposed to be underneath the old arrangements. It was supposed to be a split between local and state at 50-50, so I'm trying to return it that. The state would have to pick up more of the dollars on that versus what's going on there. I've got several bills dealing with education, dealing with report cards and various rules for that. I've got a cemetery grant bill that we're working on with some constituents. Actually, quite a few of my bills, local constituents have brought to me, and we're working on those. Another bill that we've drafted that we're going to be introducing is, and I wanted to bring this to your attention because I know this is something you're working with or dealing with here at the city level, is dealing with massage parlors. And so what I've got is I've got a bill that we started on 6 months ago or longer, where we would regulate massage parlors at the state level. Wouldn't necessarily take away anything at the municipal level. We've been working with the Municipal League and the Township Association because of an issue that occurred in actually in the city of Powell, where a massage parlor, which they knew had some issues, moved into the township. Townships have no authority over them. So we felt that in working with not only the massage parlor industry, who wants to have legitimate massage parlors, and working with them, the Township Association, municipalities, to come up with a bill, and we're well on our way with that. I think it's close to being introduced. I've got several co-sponsors that are going to be on the bill, and we're hoping to move that one forward to try to regulate that at the state level. So it'd be like a licensure similar to like appraisals and insurance and so forth. I've got a bill dealing with veterans county boards, and some of that we've been working on that. We had a veterans fee waiver program and that I'd introduced before. We're going to try to reintroduce that as well and try to get that in the budget. I've also been working with and meeting with locally here members of the Delaware County Fair Board to discuss how we may want to go forward with the Delaware County Fairgrounds and the bed tax in the future on that. So I know that Chip Thompson and they are going to come up with some plans as to what they've been doing with the money and what they're planning to do, so that we have an idea of what may be needed for future needs. And then just as you may know, this is a summary of the changes to House Bill 62, which is the transportation budget. As you may know, Governor DeWine introduced an 18-cent a gallon tax increase. The House cut that back to 10.7 cents on gasoline and 20 cents on diesel fuel. And the House version would phase it in 7 cents as of October 1st of this year, and an additional 3.7 cents in October 1st of 2020. And then they would add a charge for electric vehicles, an annual registration fee of $200, and hybrid vehicles of $100. What we were told is that about 4 or 5 years ago, there were only about 500 electric vehicles in the state on hybrid vehicles. There are now 20,000, and they think that's going to exponentially grow in the next 4 to 5 years. So I believe that we should have, if they're going to be utilizing the roads, there should be a way that they also help cover the cost of the roads. Compressed natural gas, which has been also exempt, they would also be given an equivalent charge on taxes to also, since they also utilize the roads. I've actually met with the compressed natural gas, and they're fine with it as long as the money goes for roads and bridges. They seem to be fine. And then there's a lot of, I've got like 3 pages of stuff, which I won't go through here, but if you've got any questions, I hopefully will be able to answer them. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and I'm ready to go, I guess.
Questions? Go ahead.
Senator, thanks for coming tonight.
Yeah.
In regard to the transportation bill, we have an item on our agenda later in support of that.
We're going to move it forward.
Okay, and in full disclosure, from a city standpoint, this is a plus for us because, as you know, we've lost a lot of state funding that used to go towards roads, and every city's in the same boat as far as trying to keep up our roads with the existing dollars. So we're in favor of what they've done to increase the share of the city. That certainly helps us. I guess my personal position is I'd still like to see either a higher tax or have it indexed to inflation, because what's going to happen is we're pushing these costs down the road, and the cost of repair will be higher. And then from the state perspective, according to Morpsey, we've got the large number of bridges and roadways and interstates that are in need of significant repair. So from the state's level as well, I think a higher gas tax is going to be justified if we're going to address these issues in a timely manner. Otherwise, we're kind of pushing these repairs 3 or 4 years down the road. So that's just my take on it. Whatever you can do when it comes to the Senate will be much appreciated.
I know that Chairman McCauley, who chairs the Transportation Committee, he had asked the director today some of those questions. Directors said that, this is dealing with future growth as well as just maintenance and repairs. So, those are some things that we're looking at. I saw where Senate President Ophoff is looking to maybe do some alternatives. I know one thing that concerned me was, clearly money going to roads and bridges, I think everybody can see that, they can understand it and so forth. But there's been some concern about other taxes, so maybe there could be an offset by cutting the income tax a little bit to help offset, especially for people with lower income ranges that may not be able to afford the increase in the gasoline tax. It doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it can make a difference, especially for people on fixed income who need every extra cent they have for that. But thank you for that. I've talked to county engineers in Delaware County and Knox County. Both of them are in strong support of the increase. They would like to see more as well.
Thank you. Yes.
And thank you for being here, Senator. Appreciate it. It's a great presentation. Sounds like you have a lot on your desk to do. Just out of curiosity, is there anything on your radar, in the Senate's radar, regarding sustainability, renewable energy, green initiatives, anything like that?
Thank you for that, Mayor, to the councilman. I'm now on the Energy and Public Utilities Committee, so I've actually had a lot of groups now coming in that I normally hadn't met. This is one committee that I have not sat on in the past. I'd requested this one to see for a little bit of a difference and to address some of the issues that have been coming about. The biggest issue that I know that we've been dealing with in the last 2 years in the General Assembly has been wind farm setbacks. And if you just go up to Wyandotte County, that's an issue up there. And if you just go a little bit to the west of here, it's an issue to the west as well. That's something that's going to have to be resolved. But we have a couple other issues. The biggest suppliers of green energy, for instance, in the state of Ohio, are both the Davis-Besse and Perry nuclear plants. And the Davis-Besse plant needs to know some stuff for certain by June 30th. Otherwise, they will shut it down because they need new rods and they have to order it. And by the time they get it, if they don't get them in time, then they have to shut it down. Once it's shut down permanently. So that's a major issue that we're probably going to have to address between now and June 30th. I'm not sure what the plans are at this point. That committee has yet to meet. Primarily, we're working on the transportation stuff. So I suspect that'll be something that'll be coming up in the coming months.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question. Thank you for being here, Senator. I have a question regarding some of Kasik's tax cuts, if any discussions have taken place about reversing some of those, like the estate tax, or if any other alternatives to a gas tax have been explored.
Well, thank you. There have been a lot of discussion over, none to undo the governor's tax cuts, not that I've heard, at least. I've not seen the budget. Governor DeWine's budget will be introduced at the end of this week. So we're going to see pretty quickly what the governor is suggesting there. I don't expect you'll see any undoing of some of the prior tax cuts. There have been some discussions for other alternatives besides the gasoline tax. I know that Senator Coley had been working on an alternative proposal to fund roads through just registration fees. It would eliminate all gasoline taxes, but raise the registration fees by hundreds of dollars per year per car. There was a lot of pushback, I know, in the General Assembly last year when he introduced that. I think it's just because there's not been enough of a discussion in the long run. I also think it's because when you do a registration fee, it's a one-time fee, and I think people can budget a little better, you know, a fee that they're paying every time through a gasoline tax. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why that one hasn't moved forward. And that might be why there's also pushback on the hybrid car registration fees. I have had a lot of negative pushback on the gasoline tax from within the district, and very little support, I will say, other than from like engineers and people who are in the roadway industry. I've had funny up in Knox County, we've been getting a lot of calls strongly against it, but I've also had a lot of calls from the Clintonville area, which is part of my district, and they're also against it because they don't want the additional registration fee on the hybrid vehicle. So it's been kind of a mixed bag on that. I suspect we're going to do something here, but I don't know what, and I think that there may be some additional discussion down the road of taking some of the surplus funds, because the state of Ohio is maxed out at a certain amount of funds that we can have as a surplus. And I think we've got some money that is beyond that. And I think there's been some discussion of taking some of that money and using it for roads and bridges and in lieu of maybe some of the higher increases. So that may be at least a short-term issue. It's not a long-term fix, clearly, that DeWine wants, but I suspect that there will probably be some sort of increase in the gasoline tax in the coming couple weeks.
George, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
Anything?
I'll second or third on the roads. We need some help. So if you're taking a project list, we'll send you a couple. But I'm in favor of the higher tax rate, the 18%. I think it puts us mostly about level with other states outside of Kentucky. It puts us about the same level. But probably phased in, increase for inflation. And yeah, I think we need to get out of it. So anyway, that's our 2 cents.
All right, well, thank you for that. Yeah, I know that Kentucky's is lower, but they also have a registration fee for cars that's higher than here in Ohio. So there is kind of an offset that I think some people don't realize on that.
This isn't really a solution for school funding. Do you see a way forward for the state fixing the formula?
Good question. I had introduced my own bill that would actually fix it, but that's such a big change. I'm going to be pushing again in this General Assembly to have that discussion. But I think that right now the biggest thing that I'm trying to do is raise those caps or get rid of the caps completely, because that's what's impacting high growth school districts. There's a discussion going on right now with e-school funding and how that would be. I think a lot of the stuff that's being discussed for that can apply to all school districts. And I say that to give you an example. The school funding here in Delaware City schools, I think it's around 11,500 a student. You go up to East Cleveland, you go to Youngstown, you're looking at $23,000 to $26,000 per student. And most of that is due to guarantees. So in other words, Youngstown had 15,000 students in 1999. They've got 5,000 students today. They're funded at around 128, 130 million per year. I think Delaware City is around 6,100 students, and we're funding them around 62 to 65 million per year. So just those guarantees has totally messed it up. And if we were just to kind of rebalance that out some, I think that would immensely help our districts across the board. I think Buckeye Valley is right there on the edge. They're barely on the guarantee, so I don't think they would be impacted by it.
Thank you.
How do you have anything? I see that Morpsey is also trying to increase the cap on the license plates on this also. Okay, that's a good thing.
Yeah, yes, I believe that the license plate fees, I think we are allowing more permissive fees to be allowed. I think that was part of the governor's proposal. I think that's going to be part of the overall discussion, getting back even to Lisa's point.
Okay. Well, anything you can do on that, because I know we were going for it and the county stepped in and kind of ruined things for us. Tell me about this cemetery bill that you were.
Well, we've had some discussion with one of the local advocates who's been going in and repairing. I know we've had the one down the road here, which went into default basically, and there were some problems with that. So we've been looking at maybe some reforms there to make sure that they have appropriate funds and auditing so that you don't have a situation again where we passed the cemetery reform bill last General Assembly. This would be a continuation of it. Where we would put some basically oversight to make sure that if you've got an organization that's holding money available for cemetery plots, that money is not embezzled and that kind of stuff, which it shouldn't have been to begin with, but I feel there needs to be a little more oversight on that.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming tonight. I really do. Did you have something to
Yeah,
say?
just one item on the House HB 54. I believe it's a local government restoration bill, and I just would make a pitch that the local government fund is a major partnership between the state and the cities, and that was obviously we all tightened our belt back in 2008 when Governor Kasich came into office, and those funds got slashed in half. And today that represents over $500,000 to us. So anything you could do to consider restoration, some partial restoration to that, those funds would be helpful to the city, because those were discretionary dollars that we could use for various programs. If you wanted to direct them to transportation, that might be a possibility as well. But every year it gets farther and farther away. It looks like we're not going to get that back, but I just make a plug for it. That's all.
Yes, I know there's been some discussion. I would say under Governor DeWine, there's more of a discussion of that. I know that many of my colleagues and I felt that, if some more of that money could be returned to the local level, whether it's cities or townships or counties, that would probably be appropriate. There's been and there was under Governor Kasich some disagreement on that local government fund, because it was a lot of times utilized to deal with a lot of the state programs that are required at the local level. So when you cut that, it doesn't necessarily help matters. So I think there is some discussion on that, and we'll see when the budget comes out here, and we're looking about 4 or 5 days. So thank you.
And then you said there was some were getting pushbacks from the hybrid and the electric cars. Chris Balderman, county engineer, gave a great presentation at one of their meetings with the commissioners as to the breakdown of how much of the task goes into repair. And it was right around $258 per car. So I think that number's pretty true. I just don't know if you need to get a handle on or get a hold of his report, but it was great.
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I talked to our county engineer last week, and I agree. I think that if you're going to be utilizing our roads and you're driving on them, you should also be contributing towards maintaining those roads.
Well, some people think it's such a minimal amount, why are we even bothering? But if you understand where the number came from, I think it makes a lot more sense.
I agree. And then there's also potential for projected growth. I mean, if you're looking at, the cars down the road, or, you're going to just exponentially grow in hybrids and alternative fuel vehicles, and we need to make sure that they're also contributing towards maintaining our roads.
Exactly. Well, I thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you. I'm glad to have been here.
Very informative.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to go on to item 14, if you want to stick around for just a minute, Senator. Elaine, will you read item 14, consideration of resolution number 1912?
Resolution number 19-12, a resolution expressing council support of Ohio House Bill 62 and the proposed increase in the Ohio motor fuel tax of 18 cents per gallon.
Are you the presenter on this?
Yeah, this is a resolution that would have council support Governor DeWine's proposal, as we've just discussed. background information in terms of our transportation programs. Mr. Farino's here this evening, and I provided at your desk tonight just some updates of numbers that you've received before on the state of the city's roads and what we currently spend and what we'd like to, what we're targeting to spend. So, Bill, do you want to add anything to the need for more revenue?
I think it was discussed well. I'll just mention one point. Back in 2000, 2001, we initiated the paver system, look at roads, and at that time we said we need $1.3 million per year to take care of our streets. I wish that's all we needed today. We spend about $1.2 to $1.3 million per year 2 decades later. That if you look at the asphalt cost doubling and the fact that our road network has increased 50% in that same amount of time, that $1.3 million equals $3.9 million today to do the exact same thing that we were told we needed to do 20 years ago. That just, you can see the gap we have in what we spend and what we need. So this is very real that this is being addressed, and we have just much local need as the state does. So I encourage the council to continue to support, as I've heard tonight.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment. I support this 100%, tend to vote for it, but I guess I would just say on a council level, I was surprised to see this resolution saying, expressing council support for this when you have to have a discussion about it. So I was surprised to see it worded like that on this agenda. Again, I support it, I'm all for it, but I'm just surprised that we had no discussion about this and then this blatant statement that council supports. I don't know if everybody supports, I have no idea, but I do.
Well, that's what we're here to discuss. We were at a emergency meeting or a COMA last week. Whenever we were there, they were talking about, they were hoping that some municipalities would take it back and discuss it and pass a resolution so that the senator knew that we were all, or the Senate knew we were all behind it. So we are open for discussion right now, Chris.
I mean, for me personally, I think it's a tricky question because, of course, I'm in favor of more money for our roads. Is this the only solution? I question that. I think that there were a lot of cuts that were made back in 2008 that Tom was talking about, that there's a lot of other avenues of reversing some of those things. And so it's not that I'm against funding for roads, because no one can argue that we certainly need that. I just think that there's other opportunities besides just an 18-cent gas tax.
And all along, we've been asking for those cuts to be reestablished.
Yes.
Since 2008, and we've seen nothing.
Yes.
And we've heard tonight it probably won't happen. Good.
Well, from my way of thinking, nobody likes to pay more for gas. But to me, the positive thing about the gas tax is it's basically a user tax. The more you use the roads, the more you pay. And there's no question about the need at the local level. There's really no question about the need at the state level. My hope would be that all the positive things that the House has done in terms of increasing the share of the city and the tax on hybrid and electric, or the registry fee on hybrid electric vehicles, that those things would stay, just that it would be considered a higher amount, maybe 18% or 18 cents a little bit too high, but a higher amount that will provide more money in the following year and definitely index to inflation, so we don't have to come back and try to do this again 3 or 4 years down the road. I'm in support of it.
I think the other, Councilman Jones, in just response to your question, this was moving pretty quickly. And we had gotten updates from OML and Warp City that we should be trying to bring this before our legislative bodies because the House acted last week, the Senate was going to act. And so my apologies that it got added without some sort of prior discussion.
Was the House bill amended or is it still in the same form? Do you know, Senator?
The House bill is now in the Senate, so we have to pass the transportation budget by March 31st. So, I mean, this is a time-sensitive matter, just to answer that, I would say. So we now have the amended, it's amended or substitute House Bill 62 is now in the Senate Transportation Committee. Our amendments are due by Thursday. So I have to put in my amendment request by Thursday if I'm going to do anything.
I think the House version reduced it to 10 cents, 10.4.
Okay. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, we got
it says
that.
House Bill 62. It's not 18 cents now?
No, it's now 10.7 cents. Well, that's what they did in the House, and that's what they passed. It was bipartisan support for, bipartisan support against. It was an interesting vote breakdown.
If I could just bring up just some stats from Warmsy that I think will support this. Ohio has the second highest number of bridges in the country, the third most freight, and the fourth largest interstate. And according to their statistics, 20% of our major roads have been rated in poor condition, and over 1,600 bridges have found to be deficient. So there's a clear call for doing something more than we've been doing for transportation.
Was that Central Ohio or was that Delaware County? Would you?
So this is Warmsy statistics on Ohio in general.
Oh, okay,
Ohio has
okay.
the
I missed the
second-
first part. Yeah, wow.
Okay, it's a resolution. If you want to vote on it, that's fine. If you don't, he needs an answer by the end of soon.
It sounds like.
I will move for approval of resolution number 19-12.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
No.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
No.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Thank you. Item 9 is consideration of a liquor permit. Please.
Consideration of a liquor permit relating to stockholder change for TH Midwest Inc., doing business as Turkey Hill 707 at 2740 Stratford Road, Delaware, Ohio 43015, permit class C1, C2, D6.
Madam Mayor, members of council, for consideration is a application for change of a corporate stock ownership. This is for Turkey Hill, located on Stratford Road. This permit is being transferred from Kroger Company to EG Retail America LLC. They recently bought 762 Turkey Hills. There's no issues with the location in Delaware, no issues that we found with the new corporate ownership. Police Department recommends signature with no request for a hearing.
Okay. What is the wish of council?
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Browning, a second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 10 is the third reading of ordinance number 1902.
Ordinance number 19-02, an ordinance amending Chapter 529 of the General Offenses Code of the City of Delaware.
This, I believe, has the requested language that was taken out. And Chris, do you want to add anything? Is there anything to add?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, so it's ready for adoption this evening. Would ask that you.
We've struck that entire section.
Yeah, that section is struck, and I believe that's reflected in the report, the staff report.
Move for the approval of ordinance 19-02.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Item 11 is the third reading of ordinance 1906.
Ordinance number 19-06, an ordinance for Carroll's Corporation approving a final development plan for Burger King on approximately 1.14 acres on property zone B3 PUD, General Business District with a planned unit development overlay district, and located at 1034 West Central Avenue, US 37.
Ms. Jacqueline?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is the third reading for the final development plan for Burger King. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Amanda is not able to be here tonight because she has a corporate responsibility up in Syracuse, I believe, but we do have representatives here at the project.
This is the third reading. Any questions?
Guess I'd just make a comment if I may.
Sure.
This one was a tough one for a lot of people, but I think that the applicant really did go above and beyond to listen to the comments that people raised to the extent that they were able and addressed those concerns. I received a lot of public comment myself about Burger King in terms of things that we can't really control. Things like, I don't want a Burger King there, or we don't need another Burger King in Delaware. And the decision criteria that we need to use is, does this plan fit the comprehensive plan for the city? Have they addressed different points in their development plan? And if all of those answers are yes, then from a council perspective, our response needs to be yes, and we can't make decisions based on. If we did, we would have a BB Bop somewhere in Delaware, at least maybe 2 or 3. But those are the criteria that we have to use. So I hope that people are understanding of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll second what Councilwoman Keller said. I was hit pretty hard by a lot of people, and there seems to be a misconception that the city went out and, encouraged Burger King to build there, and why didn't you guys bring in, Chick-fil-A or beef, so I agree with what Lisa said.
Nothing against Burger King.
No.
I'm sure lots of people will still go there.
Yes.
With that, I will move for approval of ordinance 19-06.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Moving on to item 12, which is the second reading of ordinance 1907. Lane, if you'll please read this.
Ordinance number 19-07, an ordinance amending Chapter 1121 and 1143 of the Planning and Zoning Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Delaware.
And there's a public hearing scheduled, and that's for March 25th. It looks like it's 7:30.
Chris, did you want to just mention quickly what what the ordinance would do?
Yes, this would be basically for a proposed massage establishment, as I've defined them in the code. To get a certificate of occupancy, they'd have to certify that they have state licensure, in short. I'd actually be very curious to see what the good senator's language is there in that bill once it's introduced, because it could overlap quite a bit.
And we have notified the existing establishments in the city regarding this, so that they are aware of the public hearing and have an opportunity to comment.
Will this go into effect retroactively?
No, it'd just be on new businesses.
Very good.
So I want to address the specific concern, I guess, of your constituent.
Yeah, I guess I'll just hold judgment until the public hearing and see what people have to say.
Very interesting. Okay, so we'll go to the public hearing next meeting from that one. Okay, we'll move on to item 13, which is consideration of resolution 19-11.
Resolution number 19-11, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a cooperation agreement with Delaware County for the resurfacing of Section Line Road.
Let me just state a couple of comments for the beginning, and Bill can fill in some of the details on this. This is a cooperation agreement with Delaware County to allow us to participate in a resurfacing project, which we've done these in the past. This is a little different because the recommendation is to use our local resurfacing dollars for the project. This was covered during the CIP discussion. I asked Bill to take a look at that. I'm not sure any of us picked up on it, quite frankly, but it is an important project. What I'm recommending is that you consider and act upon this favorably this evening, but if we can identify another source of funding for this, I would rather not take 85% of our local resurfacing dollars and put it into Section Line Road. We have a meeting later this month with the Finance Committee where we will be talking about an update to our CIP, and hopefully at that point we can identify another funding source if possible for this project. But we do want to try to cooperate as much as we can with the county engineer for these projects. And Bill, I don't know if you want to elaborate at all. They're doing another project. They're cooperating on the Houck Road project this year, I believe.
Yeah,
The
very.
resurfacing of that.
These are very typical. We work with the county on Pollock Road, Armstrong Road, Warrensburg Road, which the county was the lead agency, designed the plans and did the administration, and then we paid our pro rata part of the actual construction. In this case, very similar for Section Line Road. We own a lot of frontage along the airport and Pittsburgh Drive area. We are also, as Tom alluded to, we are asking the county for about $130,000 this year and for them to participate in Houck Road reconstruction between 36 and 37. And it'll be a very similar agreement, only we'll be the lead agency making those repairs. We also have identified Vernon Avenue as a joint project coming up here fairly shortly as well that will probably be lead and work with the county. So these are very typical type agreements that we have every year, and we just encourage council tonight to approve this. We have been requested by the county. They're ready to bid this, and they're hoping we take action tonight so they can go ahead and actually put this on for bid later this week. I can answer any questions regarding this particular issue tonight too.
Questions?
Move for the adoption of resolution 19-11.
Second. Just real quick, Madam Mayor, I'm going to abstain from this because it's
Okay,
a county.
yes. Thank you. Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Jones.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Abstain.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just look for some more money, okay? Another pot to take it out of so we can fix our current roads. Item 15 is consideration of ordinance 19-08. Elaine, if you'll please read this on the record.
Ordinance number 19-08, an ordinance prohibiting use of any form of tobacco within 50 feet of recreational facilities of city parks.
This is, and I know Ted Miller will come forward, but this is really a modified version of what was originally recommended to City Council, which was an outright ban on the use of tobacco in public parks. That came out of a discussion that the Parks Board had with input from the Health Department, and that was presented to Council a couple of months ago, and I think there was a request to modify that. So what's before you tonight would simply make it an offense to within 50 feet of a recreational area or field, anybody to be smoking. So, and this is set for a public hearing.
Yes, the next meeting, and we just basically amended the language which is included in the ordinance to include that in there and make it an offense also, so.
You said smoking, but this isn't just for smoking, right?
Right, it's, I believe it's
Tobacco
use of
use.
other tobacco.
This is going to include like vaping and that kind of stuff? Or?
Yep, e-cigarettes and all of that, yep.
You said there's a public hearing scheduled on this?
Yes, I believe, yes, right?
We scheduled it,
For the 25th?
yes,
Okay.
at 8:00 p.m.
Okay.
Can I give a couple comments on this now?
You absolutely can.
I will be not here on the 25th because it's spring break. So at first, I was like, no way. The libertarian in me screams whenever we try to regulate extra things that we didn't need to before. I've heard from so many people, though, that this actually is a problem at ball games and things like that. People who have kids with asthma. So I guess, is there a way to compromise this and get rid of any form of tobacco and make it so that if someone's tobacco use is impacting someone else, I could see that. If somebody is chewing and spitting into a cup sitting next to me at a baseball game, I don't see why we need to tell that person they can't do that. So I guess that's just my comment. Instead of saying any form of tobacco, couldn't it be, isn't there a way to put in there some kind of smoke that's bothering someone else?
But what if it bothers you and not the person on the other side of them? You know, where it then becomes very gray.
I mean, isn't there a way to say like a cigarette smoke? Or, I mean, I don't know, what are people smoking nowadays? Vape things, I don't, why does,
Smoking and the smokeless tobacco wouldn't be.
right, why can't we just get rid of the smokeless tobacco since it doesn't really affect anybody? That just seems like a big overreach. Just suggesting a compromise.
We did talk about that one
Yeah, we
time.
did, but then it still says any form of tobacco in this, so That's just my only suggestion, is if it doesn't really bother anybody, then.
Yeah, I think the issue tends to be one of, I don't think we've yet determined what our objective is with this proposed ordinance. Is it, okay, if what I'm doing, if you don't like the smoke, okay, is that what we're trying to do? Are we saying that we want our parks to be healthy venues, therefore, we're also saying you can't have any other type of tobacco? What are we really trying to do here? Are we trying to say our parks are where we want our young kids to spend their time, therefore we want to be as healthy environment as possible? Oh, except for if it's at the golf course and then anything goes, drinking, smoking, pole dancers, whatever. So, what are we really trying to accomplish? Because you can't be kind of pregnant.
I think it's I don't see it as any different than the current ordinance that you can't smoke within so many feet of the opening, of the door, of a restaurant, whatever the current.
Mhm.
I think it's the same type of ordinance.
How's that one written? Can you chew tobacco within?
Yeah, I believe it's just smoke.
So could we look at that and kind of copy? that?
Yeah, I mean, you can, but part of the objective is to set the example of, there's at parks, there's kids at ball games, even the smokeless tobacco, as is seen if a coach is chewing the smokeless tobacco or a parent or something, it's still, is that the right example we want to see out there? So part of the objective is to eliminate the smokeless and tobacco use from the park setting, just like we did the playgrounds, where we didn't differentiate between smokeless and smoking tobacco there. It was tobacco use.
I can respect that. That's the part I can't get behind.
Yeah, from my perspective,
Okay.
I don't think we're in a position to legislate the example parents set for their kids.
I
What we're
agree.
trying to do is keep people's use of tobacco from impacting other people, especially young people at these recreation events. I don't think it's our job to tell other people how to conduct I want everybody to be healthy, but it's not my job to tell them how to do that.
I agree.
So do we stop at the smoking or do we add the vapor? Some vapors have sense, some don't.
I don't know anything about that, so I can't have an opinion
To
on it.
me, it kind of falls into smoking.
Is that like the smoke that's not really smoke?
Yeah.
And you can smell it.
Sure, yeah.
Some of them have nicotine in them, some of them have
Right,
nothing in them, some of them have THC in them.
Still impacts other people. I can get behind that.
I guess one of my issues, and I'd like to hear from the chief on this, is making this an offense, and with that 50 feet built in there, that seems like it's gonna be a enforcement nightmare. And I don't think they're gonna go out and like rake people for it, but they're gonna get called, and the person's gonna say, I demand that person get cited because they're 50 feet from the softball field smoking. When that goes to court, it's gonna be difficult.
I think the intention of this is that it's not a penalty per se to violate this section, but it gives us a basis to ask someone to exit the park. If someone doesn't listen to park staff and exit the park if they're smoking, and the police have to come there, then it would be a violation of criminal trespass for not leaving a premise when you've been asked to do so.
Could we just not?
So it's not gonna be an offense to smoke, it's gonna be an offense to not, if you're trespass out or?
Correct.
That was my understanding in the drafting process, that the trespass would be the actual primary offense.
So it gives us a lot of latitude, or actually it's really rather permissive and not very draconian in enforcement. But if someone intentionally disregards the rule and then intentionally disregards the authority that is trying to ask them to adhere to the rule, then they're going to catch a second-degree misdemeanor trespass. That in and of itself is usually significant and suitable to get compliance.
I think the origin of this came from someone on the committee that they were at a ball game at Mingo, and someone was smoking right behind the dugout, and they said, "Sir, please stop." And this person decided they didn't want to stop. So it was that person, and they were looking for, okay, how do we, it was the person that does the but
Could we just not sign our parks and say, please don't smoke, or no smoking permitted, regardless of what this ordinance states? I think I think the majority of people, if it's properly signed, would go for that, because otherwise, I mean, you're still going to have it up. You're going to have it at every field. No smoking within 50 feet of this sign, or whatever it is, because, yeah, again, what is that? If I'm sitting on the swinging bench there, looking at the river by Mingo, and somebody stands behind me and smokes, are they in violation? I don't know. I've got no idea. You know, what are you determining as a recreational area, facility, whatever? I think it's very ambiguous. I think it just tell people not to smoke. And there will always be an idiot that'll do it anyways. And they're probably not going to stay around. If we call the police, they're going to be gone before the cops get there.
Well, that was the original recommendation, I think, of the Parks Board, was just an outright prohibition of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's an overreach. To tell somebody they can't walk down the trail at Smith Park and smoke is an overreach. I'm not comfortable with
Yeah.
making that dictate to people. Those parks are there for everybody's use. We're trying to keep people from impacting
Other people. Smokers pay taxes too.
So
We do.
Just don't walk behind them, I guess.
So then we would have to change this from tobacco to smoking to, I don't know, smoking. You okay over there? Need a cigarette? Sorry, Jackie. Just slipped out. What do you want to change it to? Sorry.
How's the playground one written now?
It's just young ones that play. It's kind of what Councilman Hauser kind of referred to as just a sign that, you know, suggests, please don't smoke.
Have we had any calls to the police regarding any of the playgrounds?
None come to mind, nothing that I can recall.
I think they could work out the language of it between,
If your intent is to take out from this current ordinance, the smokeless.
That's what I'd say. Just strike smokeless tobacco products and item F and eliminate that. And it's the e-cigarettes and smoking.
What about ingestible forms?
I don't know what that is.
I don't
Chewing
even,
tobacco maybe? I don't know.
You don't want to just that, let me tell you.
is that nicotine gum?
You know, the health department's here tonight. They could probably do that part better than I, as far as ingestible. But I know some of the vaping techniques, you know, it does, there's a litter component to that vaping technique that, you know, we're trying to get rid of litter component also. But, and they also, some are smokeless and some are. Abby, you want to help?
Throwing life preserver?
So what was the question? Sorry.
Name and address.
Ingest.
Oh, I'm sorry. Abby Trimble, 181 North Washington Street.
Ingestible forms.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's like your dips and your chews, those products.
Okay.
I think.
And that was the part of the smoke. So it would be under smokeless tobacco.
So those would be permitted if you remove this language. Okay.
What, say that again?
They would be permitted.
What would?
If you removed what
Dip.
she just
Dip and
described.
Well, you just, so it wouldn't be, yes.
If
okay.
you consider
Yeah,
that smokeless.
Yeah, right.
Because they're not affecting somebody by.
Yeah, I get you, all right.
Okay.
But then the question, my coming back, what's a recreational facility?
I would ask Chris, I would say if you're on a playground, if you're on a swing next to the river, I think we would consider that to be facility. That would be a facility of the city. If we need to define that a little more,
I mean, isn't that a walking path?
Yeah, the walking path's a
Path is a
facility.
Well, we
recreational
defined it
facility.
as the recreational fields and recreational buildings, playgrounds,
Equipment.
basically ball fields, yeah, equipment.
We probably need a definition in there.
Yeah, like on a trail is not necessarily considered a recreational facility. We specified out in there, I think, and part of that, and we can add that language to there to make it real specific. What buildings.
I just see where this is a feel-good, do-nothing ordinance, is what I see this is evolving into or devolving into.
Well, the good news is you can vote against it.
Yeah, I absolutely.
I think most people will honor this one. And I think most people see it makes sense not to smoke around the ball field where kids are playing baseball or soccer or whatever.
So if, depending on what you do this evening, we'll inform what we notice for the public hearing. So if you make amendments to what you had before you this evening, that'll be what we'll use for the public notice. So if your intention is to leave it the way it is for the public hearing or make some changes to it now and present that amended version.
That's what I would
Because we left it broad, because we knew that there were some concerns about the way it was currently.
I would suggest we strike the smokeless tobacco products and potentially we add a definition of what we mean by recreational facilities, buildings, and sports playground.
Agreed.
Okay. And that would be what we present for here. That would be my suggestion.
I can,
You see it there?
yeah, I could get behind that.
Is you okay
I'm
with
fine with that.
that? Okay.
Chris, did you get that? In terms of facilities, we're going to be just being a little more specific on that.
I mean, I guess I would like public feedback on every combination. But
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we voting on making the change?
My
Make a
recommendation
motion.
would be that you vote
Okay.
on making the changes as was just suggested.
I'm going to move, we strike the smokeless tobacco products and add definition of recreational facilities for ordinance 1908.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Okay, item 16 is consideration of ordinance number 1909. Elaine, if you please read this on record.
Ordinance number 19-09, an ordinance for Metro Development LLC for approval of a final development plan for Seattle House Apartments, 240 units on approximately 24.212 acres, zoned R6 and B3 PMU, multifamily residential and community business district with a planned mixed-use overlay district and located on the north side of US 3637 and south of Bowtown Road, just east of Chevron Auto Storage Lot.
Thank you. Mr. Eflin?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is a final development plan for the Seattle House Apartments, 240 units. The entire property was recently rezoned by City Council. It included two sub-areas, as you'll recall. Sub-area A, which is the subject of the final development plan tonight, and would be the location of the apartments. And sub-area B, which would be a commercial outlot and which would come forward at a later date once a user would be identified for its own final development plan. The final development plan is in conformance with that recently approved zoning and zoning text. It was a planned mixed-use overlay. It's also in conformance with the preliminary development plan and the conditions thereof. And with the conditions noted within your ordinance this evening, that would bring that in full conformance with those previous approvals. Again, it's for the same 240 units. Your Planning Commission did recommend unanimous approval at its March meeting. One question that we had on this rendering is the fact, and this is handled by a condition in your ordinance, that the mounds on the west and the east would be extended as far as practical and still maintain a 3-to-1 slope. But as you can see, there's additional tree plantings in addition to those mounds being extended. Along those property lines. I think with that and the lateness of the evening, I'll stop and be happy to answer any questions that you may have, but it is in conformance with the previous approvals.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Eflin? Did the applicant want to add anything tonight? You have to state your name and address.
Joe Thomas, Metro Development, 470 Old Wellington Road. Just basically want to state that I'm very appreciative of all the help I've received from the city staff, Mr. Efflin's department, Mr. Ferrigno's department with the engineers department, fire chief with their department, as well as Jerry Warner within the building department. We've had very good dialogue with multiple departments, very helpful. You guys got to commend your individual staff members for a wonderful job that they've done on this project, as well as what they do in the city of Delaware every day. So appreciate the opportunity to, welcome us to this community. We expect great things out of us. So I'm just here to answer any further questions.
You gonna figure out my recycling things in here for these guys?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll stand at the curb and do what I have to do. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just teasing.
No, I understand.
Just a couple of questions. It's not related to the application was before City Council. Just curiosity in terms of the rent price points, just with all the discussion about housing affordability and multifamily units, how will these be priced?
We're still going through that model as far as the pricing, but our estimation's anywhere from $900 to $1,200 a month, depending on the unit style, as well as it could go a little bit higher depending if they choose to rent a garage or not. And then there's other programs. There's additional fee for pets, as well as that adds on additional amount each month, as well as a non-refundable deposit.
So 900 would be kind of the base in terms of it, like one bedroom.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Any other questions? What is the wish of council? Do you want to?
This is I would think we want to take it to one more, just because it's the first time we've seen, the public hasn't seen the final development yet. This is the latest rendition, isn't it?
Well, it's the same thing we got in the zoning. We got it all done, but
Is there any change other than the mounting?
No, we just buttoned up the details.
It's up to council. I'm okay with it tonight's final
Yeah.
plan, but
I'm fine too.
I'm going to suspend the rules regarding the readings on ordinance 1909.
Why, can I just ask though, why we have this policy that says, except in very rare circumstances, development projects will go to at least 2?
you can go to another one. We've heard it all.
Yeah.
At the zoning, we went through everything.
I understand we have, but I think that the requirement that we read things 3 times isn't necessarily for us, it's for the public so that they have a chance to see it.
I don't think anything's changed in this from the last 3 times this has been before council. Okay, either way, we tend to, on the final development plan, or there's nothing changed, it goes through, so.
I'm okay with whatever the will of council is. I think we should take it to 2. But I'm not going to stomp my feet and run out or anything, if you guys want to go ahead.
What's the wish of the rest of the council?
I'll second the motion to suspend the rule.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Rohr. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
No.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
No.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of ordinance 1909.
Thank you very much.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Rohr. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
No.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Good now.
Now you're good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item 17 is continued discussion and recommendation of special events. Mrs. Walker.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. As promised, I brought before you again the discussion about with the special events policy, and wanted to know if there were any additional questions that maybe I could answer, if you've given any thought, just so that we could give our special events committee and the folks that are gearing up to have events this summer some direction.
I had the opportunity to attend a special events committee meeting and was very impressed with the level of detail and the amount of staff time that goes into all of the planning of these special events. I always envisioned a little group sitting around a table, and it's much larger than that and much more involved. I'm wondering if you think that there will be any unintended consequences. It seems like it's fairly small amounts for most of the events. And then there's some events that are really big and huge and really costly. And there's separate agreements with those events anyway, right?
Right. Like, for instance, Ironman. Right, right. I know that there was some discussion when you were there about like New Moon. New Moon's getting bigger. We've become more of a runner's paradise here in Delaware. I mean, we just have a lot of running events, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. I guess my thought is that if we could at least give this a try for 1 or 2 years, see how it goes, see if there are any unintended consequences. If council is so inclined in having a charge for some of these special events, we're basically just looking for some policy decisions. If council is willing to say, you know what, we're not going to charge as long as there's a 501c3, that's fine as well. It's really, we're just getting a lot more requests now, and we want to be fair to everyone. I would stand by the fact that there should always be a 501c3, either as a host or as a recipient of a host. We don't close, that's our current policy. We don't close the streets unless there is now.
What's the rationale behind it, just out of curiosity?
Just so that somebody who's just wants a marketing gig, they can't come in and say, well, you closed it for Main Street. Why aren't you closing it for Pepsi?
Makes sense.
I saw that the 501c3s have to be associated with the county. I think that's probably the right answer, but is there a discussion about benefiting the city, like, narrowing that focus, or is that a little too narrow?
I'm all for it.
Was there any discussion around that?
There really wasn't a lot of discussion. The one thing that, as many of you may know, that for instance, let's take the New Moon. I recommended Craig Thompson with Gringswell that he was looking at a way to partner better with the downtown community. And one of the things that I had suggested to him is to select Main Street as his 501c3 this year, as it does directly impact our downtown businesses. That way they can see that that money is going back into Main Street and will eventually be turned out again for marketing and promotion of the downtown. And he said he was going to reach out to the executive director, Susie Bibler, about making that happen. Also, Main Street has an amazing network of volunteers, which they're always willing and happy to get out there and volunteer for, especially something that's going to benefit them to this extent. And I would like to, if council is so inclined to start the charging process, I really, I failed to include, when speaking about Main Street, even though they are a current partner with us, what we want to do is say existing Main Street events. So that means First Fridays and the December events. As I explained to the executive director last week, I said she may not be here in 10 years. We all know I'm not going to be here in 10 years. So, we don't want what's that? Not even 10 months. That's right. So we wanted to make sure that if we wrote this as that Main Street was excluded, then the next director could say, I want something every week. And we don't want that to happen. So what we said is existing events, so that any other event they would have, they could be subject to a charge. But it's up to you.
Currently planning a summer and winter street.
Right. So currently there exists, that is on our schedule. So that can be.
That's a good name.
We used it years ago, didn't we, Carolyn?
Yes, we did.
Good name.
We did that for years.
So, but if council would rather not charge, that's fine. I just want to give our committee some direction so they know need to know how to move forward in our monthly meetings.
And there's currently no charges?
It varies. Currently it's a variable. Sometimes there's Greenswell, there is a charge. And so that's why it's kind of hit or miss. That's why we wanted to solidify this,
Because some of the conversation was about the police cost to this.
Right.
Is that where the charging comes in at then?
It will be police, fire, public works. Okay. For instance, like with like New Moon, the majority of our costs are with public works. With the arts festival, public works and police are probably public works a little bit more. I'm trying to think of some of the other events where police could be a lot more expensive. Greenswell might be, there could be some of the running events. Right, Chief? I'm staring at you.
Parades, but.
Parades are excluded.
The strategy when New Moon came in was to kind of consolidate a lot of the 5K runs and use the course at the Y or the course they're behind Coles because those are really easy to manage with very few officers. But the New Moon is, we'll have 25, 30 officers on that course because you have to staff every intersection where there's travel and anywhere where runners are crossing traffic. So it's really labor intensive.
Jackie, you were suggesting 6 months, so would it essentially be
Sure. Once
the
council,
new full season?
yeah, I'm sorry, Tom, I didn't mean
The
to
new
interrupt you.
season?
Actually, what I propose is 6 months from the time council adopts a new policy, that it would go into effect. So 6 months from March is September, so we would be almost finished with what we consider the prime time special events. So we can make it effective January 1 of 20. I would encourage council to take seriously my recommendation to have the DORA policy changed now that we've been through a year. I would like to make that change yet this year, I think, to help out some of our organizations that would like to have DORA events but aren't going to don't need to close the roads. They would still be responsible for paying our staff to put out the DORA signs, but they would not have to have the additional insurance.
If I can make a comment, I think this is important for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's important that we have consistency in how we charge.
Yes,
Rather than
absolutely.
One way, one another. But two, I think we're being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars to try to cover some of the costs. We want to promote these events, but recovering some of the costs seems reasonable. to me.
Sure.
So I think you've done a good job with this. And I support it as you've written. I think it's good.
Are you thinking the 50% then, Vice Mayor?
Well, I thought these are two different situations. Where,
There were two different options. One was 50%, one was 75%.
okay, I guess I misunderstood
Mhm.
reading this. I thought we were under two different situations where they're charging admission to an event is different from item one, where they're not. Is that was?
County funds are charging. Oh, I apologize, yes. No, those are the same. I'm sorry. It's one event policy, right? But one was, they were charging admission, right? Apologize.
So that makes sense if they're charging admission. that
Yep.
We recover more from them than.
Yes.
what
Sorry
comes
about that.
in ours, so.
Time change,
So depending on your inclination, I think what I would suggest is you put it in the form of a resolution and you bring it back and you formally adopt it so that we're clear on what it is. But is the recommendation Jackie has made, is that supported?
I'll put it in the
Option
resolution.
number 2 is a non-501c3.
No, it's a 501c3 charging funds or emissions.
It says
It says it's a non.
It says a no.
A non-501c3.
Are we gonna allow, I mean,
But they commit.
is that gonna be allowed? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand.
Well, if it's a non-501c3 and they're charging admission, but yet have a host entity.
You still have to contribute. to
Yeah,
the 501c3
they still have to
in
contribute.
Delaware County. But they're not a 501c3.
Right.
Right, Jackie?
Right.
And
So-
would you suggest that we adopt the DORA policy immediately, but delay the other ones until the start of the new?
Yes, I really do, because we do have some, like Rotary, we have some people that could really use a DORA policy, but the insurance was just cost prohibitive, and the money, the liability does go back on to the person who's been involved in the altercation or incident and and whoever was serving from the liquor permit. I'm happy to write a resolution then, and we'll bring it back in 2 weeks if that's all right with everyone.
It's good to me.
Okay.
Thank you very
I
much
will-
for your work on this.
I apologize for my mistakes.
Item 18 is city manager's report.
Just a couple of items. We're preparing for this Saturday's retreat. You'll be getting a notice. The agenda will go out tomorrow. That will include some background information, just some of the prior retreats we've had. Jane Dockery, who is the facilitator, is working on summarizing the survey responses back from council and staff. And we'll get those out to us on Wednesday. So you'll have a chance to take a look at those before the meeting.
And our target time is
8:30 to 1. Yeah. And, we'll make good use of our time. It's at Camp Lazarus. Council Clerk McCloskey put before you this evening a menu,
Menu.
something food. Regarding videotaping in chambers, there was a question Councilman Hellinger raised a couple weeks ago regarding the status of upgrading the video quality in the chambers. That is due. Hopefully, we're going to get that done before June, but there is some work that has to be done, some electrical work that has to be done that makes it a little more complicated. So, but that's on the IT staff agenda to get done. So that will hopefully result in a better quality picture for the viewing public. And I don't know if you saw Lee's post earlier today on Facebook thanking a number of members of the public who came out this weekend and it helped with invasive species clearing in Mingo Park. My thanks to the public who helped as well. And then I think I alluded to this before, but before you, this is just updated information. You've seen this before, but it's updated in connection with our infrastructure cost, our road maintenance costs. This will be probably discussed. Some of this might be discussed at an upcoming Public Works meeting, but we also wanted it in connection with this Saturday's retreat. So that's all I have.
Okay, council comments? Mr. Jones?
I have none tonight.
Mrs. Geller?
I mentioned next week is spring break. I will miss, or not next week, I'm sorry, the week after, I will miss the next council meeting.
Daytona Beach.
Cruise, Caribbean. And I'm going tomorrow to Trillium to respond to a constituent issue with the stream. Blake is attending with me, and hopefully we can answer some questions. Thank you.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
I have a couple things. First off, I talked with Mr. Eflin earlier today. One of our cases at BCA on Wednesday has to do with the food truck depot. And I think at some point, and just kind of put in the back of your mind, we're going to want to revisit that. I think we need to revisit that food truck ordinance that went into effect back in 2011, saying you can only be at one spot for so many days and what have you. It's going to come back up, and I think food trucks is kind of showing their worth, or, that they're not driving our brick and mortars out from downtown. Second thing, I was made aware of potential ethics issue within the sister city. And I would like to see that. I had some discussion with Jackie on this. I think that needs to go in front of the Ohio Ethics Commission to determine what those issues are, if there are issues. And if they are, because there appears to be a potential conflict of interest between one of those members on the sister cities board and the functioning of that board. So hopefully we can get that taken care of. Third thing, I enjoyed Mr. Rush's beating the drum for the BIA, but I do have a little bit of a retort back with response to that. Development by itself is neither good nor bad, and growth is not necessarily beneficial or desired. We hear it quite often. If you're not growing, you're dying. That's not true. I will say that is definitely not true. Also, it's important to understand that developers are one of the largest, if not the largest, contributor to local, county, and state political candidates. Developers expect return on their political contributions. The BIA and developers have funded the campaigns of the mayor, the vice mayor, and Councilman Rohr. Developers are capitalists. They develop land and do not have the best interest of the community in mind, in my opinion. Okay. That's all I got to say about the BIA. Last thing, last week, or at our last meeting, I handed out the Transparency Initiative. I know some of you were rather irate at that, and that's fine. However, let me follow up on that. So this week is Sunshine Week, and Sunshine Week is a national initiative spearheaded by the American Society of News Editors to educate the public about the importance of open government and the dangers of excessive and unnecessary secrecy. At the February 25th council meeting, I provided council and staff a paper detailing my transparency initiative. I proposed this initiative to confront some of the major causes of growing distrust of government within our community. Transparency is a foundation element of public trust. Government is meant to benefit the community as a whole, not individuals, groups of individuals, campaign contributors, or political action committees. Community confidence and support of local government is weakened when public officials perform self-serving actions. Government laws, rules, policies, and regulations apply equally to all without exception. The bad behavior of a public official taints all government workers. Officials need to use good judgment and perform their duties within legal, moral, and ethical guidelines. Actions are expected to be void of any perception of impropriety. When an official has violated the public trust, it is critical that rules be enforced and corrective actions taken. To condone malfeasance in any manner is detrimental to the community. Public trust in government is sacrosanct. The need for and value of ethics and transparency in government cannot be overstated. This is why we are provided ethics training on a regular basis. Public officials who fail to enforce ethic laws and transparency are complicit in bad actions and undermine the public trust and confidence of their constituents in the governing body which they participate. Each of us has to answer to our own actions, not only for ourselves, but to the community we serve. That's all I got. That's number 4.
No, thank you.
Well, I do have something. First of all, I want to apologize for something that I did wrong. Council received a report this week. I had asked, I was here at City Hall for a meeting with Ted Miller, interviewing somebody for Park and Recs. Ted was excited about finding the cherry blossom trees to plant on the corridor of 23 and 42. He knew how excited I would be because I've been after him since we got back from Japan. I thought this would be a great thing for Delaware. I got excited when he told me about him, and I said, I would really love one. He said, I will get one. You'll pay for it. And I shouldn't have asked him. And I apologize. And I'm sorry that I did it. I'm very sorry that I did it. I could dig the tree up and bring it back. Let him plant it someplace else. I will. It's in my front yard. But I am very sorry for what I did. So I do apologize to all of you.
You paid for the tree, right?
Yes.
I'd like to just interject a comment. The mayor and I have had several conversations about this. I assure you, she's lost a great deal of sleep over this. I think she realized that, one, she made a mistake by asking for this to happen, but more importantly, she was down dealing with some health issues with her mom, bills didn't pay on time, so I'm convinced that she realized she made a mistake. I just have to weigh that against all the good that the mayor does and her dedication to the city. And my opinion is she's made a mistake. She's acknowledged a mistake. I don't see any need for any further action, but I'd like to see what our other colleagues think.
I agree with the vice mayor.
I accept the mayor's apology.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My sleep gains weight back. With that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
No.